The galaxy was consumed by war. Two great factions, the Selver Dominion and the Vokrath Alliance, had been fighting for nearly a century. Countless planets had been reduced to ash, entire civilizations erased from existence. It was a war of dominance, of power, of survival. And through it all, Earth remained silent. Humanity had never picked a side. While other species were forced into alliances or conquered by brute strength, Earth stood apart. They spoke of peace, of neutrality, of staying out of the conflict. To the galaxy's war-hardened rulers, it was an act of cowardice. The humans were weak, unwilling to fight, unwilling to take a stand. They had technology, they had resources, but they lacked the will. They were nothing more than silent observers, watching from the shadows as the galaxy tore itself apart. For years, both factions had tried to convince Earth to join them. The Exelver Dominion, a brutal empire ruled by warlords, saw humanity as a potential ally, a species that could be used, shaped into another tool of conquest. The Vokrath Alliance, a coalition of warriors who prided themselves on strength, saw them as nothing more than cowards who refused to prove themselves. Diplomats had been sent, deals had been offered, threats had been made. Yet every time, humanity's response was the same: neutrality. Then came the summit on Vorn 5, a rare gathering of leaders from both sides, a temporary truce to discuss the war, its future, and the possibility of peace. It was a stage for negotiation, for posturing, for silent threats wrapped in polite words, and for the first time in decades, Earth was invited. 3 human diplomats arrived, escorted to the Grand Hall where the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat. The Exelver Chancellor, a towering reptilian creature draped in obsidian armor, watched them with cold amusement. His golden eyes gleamed as he leaned forward, his voice a low growl that echoed through the chamber. So the ghosts of the stars have finally decided to speak. The hall was silent, dozens of alien leaders turning to watch the humans. The Vokrath warlord, a monstrous figure with 4 massive arms and a body covered in battle scars, let out a deep chuckle. "They won't fight," he sneered. "They never do. They hide while others bleed. That is the way of their kind." Laughter rippled through the room, quiet but sharp. Humanity was a joke to them, an insignificant species clinging to the illusion of peace in a galaxy built on war. The human diplomat, an older man with silver hair and calm eyes, smiled politely. "We are here to listen," he said, "to understand. War is costly. We prefer peace." The Selver Chancellor's grin widened, showing rows of serrated teeth. "Peace," he said mockingly. "You think peace exists. You think it matters. This galaxy is ruled by strength, human. The weak do not get to choose their place." The human diplomat simply nodded. Perhaps. The summit continued, filled with arguments, promises, and thinly veiled threats. The humans remained silent, offering no opinions, making no deals. To everyone else, it was proof of their weakness, proof that they were nothing more than passive spectators, afraid to take a stand. Then the attack began. Explosions ripped through the building, shaking the very foundations of the Grand Hall. Sirens blared as the lights flickered, and outside, the sky turned red with fire. Warships roared above the city, unleashing destruction. Someone had planned an ambush, hoping to eliminate key leaders in one strike. Panic erupted. The Exelvar warriors pulled out their plasma blades, roaring as they formed defensive lines. The Vokrath soldiers grabbed their rifles, returning fire as guards rushed to escort their commanders to safety. The air filled with the sound of battle, energy blasts cutting through the chaos. And the humans, they did nothing. As aliens ran for cover, the 3 diplomats remained seated, their expressions unchanged. The Exelver Chancellor turned toward them, his amusement gone. His voice was a snarl. "Now is the time to prove your strength, humans, or will you sit there and die like the weaklings you are?" The older diplomat sighed and stood slowly, His eyes scanned the chaos, his face unreadable. He turned to his two fellow humans and gave a slight nod. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The first diplomat moved so fast that even the HFY warriors, trained in battle, barely saw him. He snatched a fallen enemy's weapon, twisted it, and fired with perfect accuracy. 3 attackers dropped before they even realized what had happened. The second diplomat dodged an energy blast, picked up a combat knife, and threw it with deadly precision. It struck an enemy's throat, ending the fight before it even began. The older diplomat simply took a step forward. He reached down, picked up a fallen communication device, and pressed a button. His voice was calm, unshaken. Activate protocol. Above the city, the sky changed. A fleet of massive warships shimmered into existence, uncloaking one by one. They had been there the whole time, hidden, watching, waiting. Their sleek, black hulls reflected the fire of battle as their weapons locked onto the attackers. In seconds, the enemy forces were obliterated. Silence fell over the Grand Hall. The HFY and HFY leaders stared in shock. The humans had barely moved, yet they had controlled the entire battlefield. Their warships had been hidden in orbit, their power concealed until the exact moment it was needed. The older diplomat turned to the stunned alien leaders and smiled. "Peace is our preference," he said, "but never mistake it for weakness." For the first time, the galaxy realized the truth. Earth had never been passive. It had been waiting. The silence after the battle was deafening. The alien leaders, once so certain of humanity's weakness, now stared in stunned disbelief. The HFY Chancellor clenched his jaw, his golden eyes locked onto the warships above. The HFY warlord, a creature who had mocked humanity only moments ago, now shifted uncomfortably, his massive hands gripping his weapon tighter. The humans had played them all. For years, they had acted as mere spectators, pretending to be powerless in a galaxy that only respected strength. But now, in a single moment, they had revealed what no one had ever suspected. Humanity had always been prepared. The older diplomat, still calm, adjusted his suit and looked around the ruined hall. The bodies of the attackers lay scattered, their failed ambush ending in complete failure. The human warships above the city remained motionless, waiting, their presence alone a warning. One of the surviving HFY warriors, his scales blackened from the explosion, took a hesitant step forward. His voice, once arrogant, now held something else. Caution. You knew this would happen. The older diplomat smiled faintly. We always prepare for possibilities. The HFY warlord slammed a fist onto the table, the impact leaving a deep dent in the metal. Lies, he growled. You tricked us. You made us believe you were weak. You let us mock you. The second human, a younger woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward, her voice cool and even. We didn't lie, she said. You assumed. The words hit harder than any weapon. For decades, the galaxy had underestimated Earth. They had seen the humans as soft, peaceful, unwilling to fight. But now the truth stood before them. Earth had never been afraid of war. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal its strength. The HFY Chancellor let out a slow breath. Then tell me, humans, he said, his voice quieter now. What is your choice? For the first time in history, humanity had the upper hand. The fate of the war, of the galaxy itself, could shift with a single decision. The older diplomat studied the alien leaders. He could see the fear in their eyes. Not just fear of Earth's power, but fear of what came next. If humanity chose a side, the war would end quickly, one way or another. But Earth had never been impulsive. We will discuss our position, the diplomat said simply. For now, consider this meeting adjourned. Without another word, the humans turned and walked away, leaving behind a room full of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, beings who, for the first time, felt truly powerless. As the human diplomat stepped outside, the warships in orbit slowly faded, vanishing once more into the void. Silent. Waiting. The galaxy had learned a lesson that day. Humanity was no longer just an observer. It was a force to be reckoned with. The diplomatic shuttle soared through the dark void of space, heading back toward the human fleet. Inside, the three diplomats sat in silence, their faces calm but their minds calculating. The mission had gone exactly as planned. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. Now, the real game began. The younger diplomat, a woman named Captain Elise Carter, glanced at the older man sitting beside her. "Do you think they got the message, Director?" Director Adrian Wells, the senior diplomat and strategist of the mission, leaned back in his seat, his sharp eyes focused on the view beyond the window. The warships of the Earth Defense Fleet remained cloaked, hidden in the depths of space. "They got it," he said. "The question is, how will they respond?" The third diplomat, Commander Darius Vaughn, folded his arms. The Vokrath warlord was furious, he noted. "He'll see this as a challenge. The XL though, they'll be more careful. They'll try to analyze our true strength before making a move." Elise smirked. "Let them wonder." For years, humanity had remained neutral, watching from the sidelines, as the galaxy tore itself apart. Other species assumed it was fear that kept them from choosing a side. In truth, it was strategy. The war had been nothing more than an experiment, an opportunity to gather intelligence, study alien technology, and prepare for the moment when humanity would reveal its hand. Now that moment had come. The shuttle approached the flagship of the Earth Defense Fleet, the HFY Aegis, a colossal warship that dwarfed anything the aliens had ever seen. Even from a distance, its dark hull radiated power. Dozens of smaller vessels patrolled its perimeter, a silent reminder that Earth was far from defenseless. As the shuttle docked, the diplomats stepped onto the command deck, where Fleet Admiral Victor Hayes was waiting. The veteran officer stood tall, his uniform crisp, his piercing gaze unreadable. "Report," he said without preamble. Adrian nodded. The mission was a success. Both factions now understand that Earth is no longer an easy target. Admiral Hayes turned to the massive holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a detailed map of the war zones scattered across the galaxy. Red markers indicated the battlefronts, while blue ones marked neutral or contested space. For decades, humanity had remained outside of this conflict, but now their presence was undeniable. "They'll send spies," Hayes muttered. "They'll test our defenses, probe for weaknesses." Darius chuckled. "Let them try. They won't find anything they can exploit." Elise crossed her arms. "The real question is, what do we do next? We've revealed our strength, but we haven't picked a side. We could tip the war in either direction, or end it ourselves." The room fell silent. It was a decision that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. Adrian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We don't rush. We let them panic. Right now, both factions are scrambling, trying to figure out what we want. That gives us power. And power, when used correctly, is the most dangerous weapon of all." Admiral Hayes nodded. "Then we wait. We let them come to us." As the command deck buzzed with quiet efficiency, the humans knew one thing for certain. This war was no longer just between the XLVR and the Vokrath. Humanity had entered the game, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The War Council chamber aboard the HFY Aegis was silent as the most powerful human leaders gathered. Admirals, strategists, and intelligence officers sat in a semicircle around the central holographic display, where the map of the ongoing galactic war flickered in sharp blue and red lines. Every battle, every fleet movement, and every political shift was tracked in real time. At the center of it all stood Director Adrian Wells, his expression unreadable. He had played the role of a neutral diplomat for years, but now, for the first time, humanity had the upper hand. Admiral Victor Hayes folded his arms, his sharp eyes scanning the display. We've shaken the balance. Both the HFYStories and the Vokrath are on edge. They're waiting for us to declare our allegiance. Elise Carter smirked. And we let them wait. Make them sweat. Commander Darius Vaughn leaned forward. We've received intercepted transmissions, he said. The HFYStories are offering alliances. They're promising us access to their advanced shielding tech and planetary defense systems. The Vokrath, on the other hand, are trying a different approach. They've issued a warning. If we don't side with them, they'll treat us as an enemy. Hayes scoffed. Typical Vokrath arrogance. Adrian tapped a few controls, zooming in on key battlegrounds. The war has been raging for decades, he said. Both factions are running out of resources. Their fleets are stretched thin, their planets suffering. They think we're a prize to be won. They don't realize we hold all the cards. A junior intelligence officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Mai Tanaka, hesitated before speaking. Sir, there's something else. Deep space scouts have detected strange movements near the outer systems. Unidentified ships. No known faction claims them. That caught everyone's attention. Hayes frowned. Pirates. Possibly. But they're organized. Too structured for raiders. They're moving in formation, staying just outside sensor range. Watching. Adrian exchanged glances with Elise and Darius. It seems we're not the only ones playing the long game. The thought was unsettling. Humanity had assumed they were the unseen force manipulating the war from the shadows. But what if someone else was doing the same? Elise sighed. So, let's sum this up. The HFYStories want to buy our loyalty. The Vokrath want to intimidate us. And now, there's a third party lurking in the dark. Darius smirked. Sounds like a perfect storm. Adrian leaned forward. His voice was calm, controlled. Then we use it to our advantage. He turned to Admiral Hayes. Send a fleet to the outer systems. Cloaked. If these unknown forces are observing, I want to know why. Hayes nodded. And what about the HFYStories and Vokrath? Adrian allowed himself a small smile. We let them fight for our favor. Play them against each other. Keep them guessing. The longer they remain uncertain, the weaker they become. The council murmured in agreement. For the first time in history, Earth wasn't reacting to the galaxy's decisions. It was making its own. The galaxy had assumed humanity was just another pawn in a grand war. They were wrong. Humanity was holding the chessboard. The vastness of space was silent, but tension crackled across the stars. Humanity had changed the game, but the game was far from over. The HFYStories and the Vokrath had both realized the same truth. Earth was no longer a passive observer. Now, the battle wasn't just about power or territory. It was about winning humanity's favor, or eliminating them before they became the deciding force. Deep in the cold void, a human fleet moved without a sound. Cloaked and undetectable, the warships of the Earth Defense Fleet shadowed the unknown vessels that had been watching from the edges of the conflict. These ships weren't HFYStories, nor were they Vokrath. Their sleek, unfamiliar design suggested something new, something hidden. Whoever they were, they had been studying the war just like humanity had. Aboard the lead stealth cruiser, EHS Phantom, Captain Adrienne Cole watched the sensor readings with narrowed eyes. They're disciplined, she muttered. Their formations are tight, no wasted movements. Whoever they aren't amateurs. Lieutenant Raj Malik, her chief intelligence officer, nodded. They're not engaging with anyone, not even the HFYStories or Vokrath fleets. Just watching. Studying. Like us. Adrienne didn't like that. If another faction had been playing the same game as humanity, that meant there were variables they hadn't accounted for. She tapped her comms. Command, this is Phantom. We have visual on unknown vessels. No signs of hostile intent, but they're organized. Orders. Back aboard the EHS Aegis, the War Council considered their next move. Admiral Hayes studied the data streaming in. We need more information. If they're neutral observers, we might be able to turn them into allies. But if they're planning something, Adrian Wells nodded. We prepare for the worst. Have the fleet maintain cloak, but get closer. We need to know what we're dealing with. The order was relayed, and the Phantom and its escorts crept closer, silent ghosts in the void. Then, without warning, the unknown ships vanished. 1 second, they were there. The next, they were gone. No jump signatures, no movement, just gone. It wasn't a retreat. It was something else. Adrian's heart pounded. What the hell was that? Her crew scrambled for answers, but none came. It was as if those ships had never existed. Back at the War Council, silence filled the chamber. This wasn't technology the HFY or Vokrath possessed. It wasn't something humanity had ever encountered. Elise Carter broke the silence. So, someone out there is watching the war. Watching us. And they have tech that makes them completely invisible. Darius Vaughn exhaled sharply. Well, that's unsettling. Adrian Wells turned back to the war map. It changes nothing. We proceed as planned. The HFY and Vokrath are still waiting for our response. We still hold the power. But despite his calm words, a cold feeling settled in his gut. For years, humanity had played the role of the unseen hand, manipulating the war from the shadows. Now, for the first time, they weren't sure if they were the only ones. The weight of uncertainty hung over the War Council like a storm cloud. The unknown fleet had vanished without a trace, but its presence left an unsettling truth. Someone else was watching. Someone with technology beyond anything the HFY, the Vokrath, or even humanity had. But there was no time to dwell on shadows. The galactic war was reaching a turning point, and Earth still held the deciding hand. Adrian Wells stood at the head of the War Council, his gaze sweeping over the assembled leaders. We move forward. The HFY and Vokrath are still waiting for our answer. We'll let them believe we're considering both offers while we prepare our own strategy. Admiral Hayes nodded. And the unknown fleet. Adrian's jaw tightened. We keep watching. If they show themselves again, we need to be ready. Across the galaxy, the two warring factions were growing restless. The HFY, sensing an opportunity, sent another diplomatic envoy to Earth. Their offer was generous: full membership in their empire, access to their strongest warships, and shared control of key resource worlds. It was the kind of deal that would have been impossible a century ago. Meanwhile, the Vokrath took a more aggressive approach. Their fleets began patrolling closer to human space, their message clear: join us, or be considered an enemy. Their commanders didn't make direct threats, but the implied danger was obvious. Earth's response: silence. Both factions waited for an answer, but none came. Inside the War Council chamber, the real game was being played. Elise Carter leaned forward, a smirk on her face. They're getting desperate. Darius Vaughn chuckled. The Vokrath don't handle patience well. If we wait too long, they'll force a confrontation. Adrian Wells tapped the war map. That's exactly what we want. He zoomed in on a key sector, a heavily contested region, where HFY and Vokrath forces were already locked in battle. If the Vokrath think we're about to side with the HFY, they'll act recklessly. They'll launch an attack they can't afford. And if the HFY think we're considering the Vokrath, they'll push harder to win us over. Hayes grinned. We make them bleed each other dry. The plan was in motion. Subtle leaks were made. Diplomatic whispers were spread. A few well-placed transmissions hinted at secret negotiations between Earth and the HFY. A few more suggested that humanity was leaning toward the Vokrath. The result was exactly what they wanted. The Vokrath launched a premature offensive, throwing everything they had into an attack to secure key systems before humanity could ally with the HFY. The HFY, fearing a shift in power, retaliated with overwhelming force. The war, which had been slowly grinding forward for decades, exploded into full-scale chaos. And Earth watched, monitored, waited. Because when the dust settled, when both factions were too weak to continue fighting, that was when humanity would make its move. The HFY and the Vokrath had been at war for longer than humanity had known about interstellar politics. Their battles had shaped the borders of the galaxy, consuming entire star systems in a conflict that seemed to have no end. Earth had remained neutral, watching from the sidelines as these two ancient powers tore each other apart. But that did not mean humanity was idle. In the shadows, they observed, learned, and prepared. When the time came, the HFY sent diplomats to Earth, offering promises of technology and protection. They painted the Vokrath as brutal conquerors who could not be reasoned with. On the other side, the Vokrath extended their own invitation, appealing to Earth's warrior spirit. They promised humanity a place among the strong, a chance to carve out their own empire alongside them. Both factions wanted humanity's strength, but neither understood that Earth was not looking for an alliance. Adrian Wells, one of Earth's top strategists, sat in a war council chamber reviewing the latest reports. The HFY and Vokrath had both escalated their campaigns, believing they needed to secure their positions before humanity chose a side. What they did not realize was that their desperation was exactly what Earth had been waiting for. Humanity had been studying their weaknesses, analyzing their mistakes, and setting the stage for something far greater than just taking sides in an alien war. The plan was simple: let them bleed each other dry. Subtle misinformation was spread, hints of secret negotiations with both factions. The HFY began increasing their offers, while the Vokrath started moving fleets closer to human space, preparing for the possibility that Earth would side against them. It did not take long for the pressure to break them. The Vokrath launched a preemptive strike, believing they needed to weaken the HFY before humanity joined the war. The HFY responded with overwhelming force, triggering a level of conflict never seen before. Systems that had remained untouched for years became battlegrounds. Entire fleets were lost in the chaos. It was total war, and it was exactly what Earth wanted. As the war raged, humanity watched. The fleets that the galaxy thought were weak remained hidden, silent, waiting for the right moment. The world leaders knew that striking too soon would risk making humanity the next target, but waiting too long could allow one side to emerge victorious. Timing was everything. Then the opportunity came. The Vokrath, desperate and reckless, launched an all-out assault on a major HFY stronghold. The HFY, in their arrogance, overextended their defenses to crush the attack. Both sides poured everything they had into the battle, neither willing to retreat. And as they tore each other apart, Earth made its move. From the depths of space, Earth's hidden fleets emerged. Massive warships, sleek and advanced, moved with deadly precision. Stealth vessels infiltrated weakened strongholds, disabling key systems before their enemies even realized what was happening. Ground forces, trained in secret for years, launched devastating strikes across the galaxy, crippling both factions in a matter of days. The HFY and Vokrath, exhausted and weakened, could not stop the onslaught. Their greatest fleets had already been reduced to ruins. Their leaders were forced to the negotiation table, not as victors, but as survivors pleading for a way to end the war. And it was not the HFY or the Vokrath dictating the terms. It was humanity. Adrian Wells stood before the alien leaders, his voice calm but firm. Earth had chosen its side, its own. There would be no alliances, no servitude to ancient empires. The war was over, and humanity would now shape the future of the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. The HFY and the Vokrath thought Earth was a passive observer. They thought humanity would bow to the greater powers of the galaxy, but they were wrong. Earth was no longer a spectator. They were in control.